This last story is about a man who experienced all the forms of religion. However, he had an encounter with the true and living God.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm Colombian, so in Colombia, the majority of people would consider themselves Catholic, but they're not really Catholic. They would just go to church maybe on Easter Sunday, for example, as was my case. So, I would go to the church, fall asleep in the pews. So to a certain extent, I was exposed to Christ growing up, but I didn't really see any of that in my parents, right? And it was only like on Easter Sunday that we would go. So growing up, actually, I grew almost like a hatred towards Christians, actually, because every time I would encounter them, they would always be trying to take me into a building. And I always thought that they were trying to get me into a building so they can judge me, or that I would have to pay tithe. And a lot of times when I would go to the building, the message would be all about, the pastor was angry because people weren't coming into the building. And that to me, it just kind of turned me off from Christianity. So from there, I started looking for truth in many different places. So for example, I went through everything from atheism, agnostic. I looked into New Age. I looked into Buddhism. I even practiced Islam for a little bit. So I was that guy that would tell you, all faiths, all religions lead to one place. So might as well try them all, right? And there's no discrimination against any, right? In the search for truth, I came into this place where I got into a deep depression, right? And I started to look into Christianity as a last resort. I started to have some suicidal thoughts. It was the season right after my first year of university, right? So at that time, I was already pursuing partying. I was pursuing drinking. I was doing all these things. And then the summer after first year of university, I fell into this deep depression, right? So I went to a church trying to seek out, what Christianity had to offer me. And that time, the pastor did an altar call, and I went up to the altar call, right? Pretty standard. I left the church feeling worse than when I came in. So I was like, maybe this isn't for me. So I actually ended up going to a tree where I used to meditate like a Buddhist. And this is like what I used to do, right? I used to try to calm my mind, reach a different state of mind, right? And it was there where I had my first genuine conversation with the Christian God. And I said, this was literally my prayer: Christian God, if you're real and Jesus Christ truly is your son and you can truly save me, then I don't need a pastor or I don't need anybody to show up to tell me who you are. I just need you to show up, and I need you to be that for me right now. So in the past, it was more always like, if you're real, then why this? It was always questioning him in a place of like being angry, But this time, it was a sincere place in my heart where I was like, God, if you're real and you can save me, whatever that means, I need saving right now from what I'm going through. And man, when I prayed that prayer, a gust of wind came out of nowhere. It was like just a violent gust of wind. It hit my stomach and it filled me with peace from my stomach up. And at that moment, I understood what true peace was. Because you see, I thought I knew what peace was because I used to practice meditation, transcendental meditation, and all these things, right? But I realized that type of peace that I felt with the meditation, it was just numbing myself to the stimulus of the world. But the peace that I encountered when I prayed that prayer was the presence of a person. And that was my first encounter with the Holy Spirit. So a week goes by and, I start reading the Bible. And it was during the span of this week that I have a dream with Jesus Christ. So in my dream, I'm in a dark valley. And during that time, I was actually on some medication. And I was having a lot of weird, vivid dreams of things coming and chasing me. And so I thought this was going to be that type of dream. And I feel somebody behind me, and this person touches my back. And as soon as his fingers touch my back, I know in my heart is Jesus Christ. I never saw him. I just had like a knowing inside, right? And I look down, and my chest splits open, and this river of light starts to flow out of my heart. It just starts gushing out, and it's like a river, but it's light. And I start screaming out in my dream, like, how can I ever articulate this love? Because it felt like 1,000,000,000 volts of liquid love was flowing through my being. It felt like my mom's love or my dad's love multiplied by 1,000,000,000. And in my heart, I was crying out like, how am I ever going to share this love? And the love was so real and so intense that it broke my heart, that at that moment, I was like, there is no way to articulate this, but it's too good to keep in for myself. And I would cry out. And in the dream, I was actually specifically crying out to my mom, like, Mom, how are we ever going to share this love? Right. And when I woke up from that dream, my appetites as a young man was completely different. At that time, I was going clubbing. I was drinking. I was doing drugs, doing all these things. But when I woke up from that dream, my appetites as a young man had completely changed. So now my desires were for the things of God. And I remember the first time I went clubbing after that dream, and it was a completely different experience. Before I would go, I would enjoy myself. I would try to find girls to hook up with. I would drink as much as I could. But this time, after I had that dream, I was at the club and I felt out of place. I felt like I wasn't being genuine to myself. And after I came home that day, I felt so dirty. And it was the first time where I actually felt conviction of sin. And so I started fighting and warring against the things that my flesh wanted, and that was one of the hardest things to do, was like give up clubbing, right? Give up partying. And I remember one day I had been invited to go to a party. But that same night, I had also been invited to go to a church service. And I remember the war inside of me was so strong. I was literally sitting in my school library and I started crying because I said, God, I really want to go to church because I love you and I've experienced you in a new way. But I also still want to continue living the way that I was before. And I felt like there was these two natures inside of me that were tearing me apart. And right there in that, in the library, I just said, God, if you really want me to cut off this life, I just pray that I would run into a Christian today. And I got up to go to the washroom to wash my face. And when I went into the washroom, a guy came in behind me that I had met earlier that year, and he had tried to preach the gospel to me. And so it was like immediately the Lord responded, and he said, oh, you know what? I was going to go to the washroom on the second floor, but the Lord told me to come to the third floor. And I just told him, like, man, that is an answer to prayer. And that night I chose to go to youth service for the first time. And it was during that youth service that, I got so touched by the Lord. And that's where I met an evangelist from Argentina, right? So he had first come to the church where, I met the Lord, and he became one of my mentors, right? And then he really sowed a lot into me. And a lot of the reasons why, I'm so passionate about God is because of what he sowed into my life. So that's a little bit about the story of how I came to know the Lord. And obviously it's been a lot of ups and downs. I've had some pretty bad fights in the spirits, a lot of things that I've had to troop through. But by the grace of God, I'm here and I'm holding strong.